The crisp mountain air carried the scent of pine and wet earth as Maxwell and I set up our tent that fateful evening, exactly 1 month before what should have been our wedding day. The rain had started as a gentle drizzle, but by 10 p.m. it was drumming steadily against our canvas shelter. That's when his phone lit up, casting eerie shadows across his suddenly troubled face. "Maya, there's an urgent matter at the company," he said, already gathering his things. His movements were rushed, frantic almost, so unlike his usual composed self. A knot formed in my stomach as I watched him prepare to leave. "But Maxwell, we're in the middle of nowhere," I pleaded, my voice trembling. "How can you leave me alone in this wilderness? It's not safe." The only response I got was the sight of his silhouette disappearing into the darkness, swallowed by sheets of rain. Fear gripped me when I heard rustling outside the tent, the unmistakable sound of a wild animal prowling nearby. With shaking hands, I called Maxwell's number. A woman's voice answered, smooth as honey, but laced with poison. "Maxwell's in the shower. He can't come to the phone right now." 3 years of trust and love shattered in that single moment, leaving me hollow. What followed was a nightmare. I stumbled through the dark forest, rain soaking through my clothes, my heart pounding with every crack of thunder and distant animal cry. Maxwell's phone remained dead silent. The fever that followed was brutal, high enough to endanger both me and my unborn child, a child I hadn't even had the chance to tell him about. The hospital walls became my new reality, but he never came to visit. The nurse's words still echo in my head. "Madam, you've been here for 2 days. We need your family's signature for the miscarriage consent form." Even now, the memory makes my heart ache. Once the fever subsided and clarity returned, I reached for my phone, still clinging to hope. That's when I saw it. A WeChat post from his secretary, Ella. The photo showed Maxwell in his bathrobe, carefully preparing brown sugar water in his kitchen. The caption was like a knife to my heart. "Whose boss is this thoughtful? Buying sanitary pads and making brown sugar water in the middle of the night?" The truth hit me like a physical blow. He hadn't abandoned me for work that night. He'd left me alone in the wilderness to care for his secretary, who was having menstrual cramps. He could have waited those few extra minutes for me to pack up, could have ensured my safety. But his priority was clear. 3 beautiful years together, years I thought were building toward forever, had been slowly unraveling since the day he hired her. Looking at that photo, I felt my chest constrict, each breath a struggle against the weight of betrayal. I gave the post a hollow like before closing the app. Some part of me still remembers how deeply we loved each other during those 3 years, but everything changed when Ella entered the picture, and now I'm left wondering if what we had was ever real at all. The hospital room felt colder as I stared at my phone, finally gathering the courage to call him. When Maxwell's voice came through, it wasn't the gentle tone I once knew. Instead, his words crashed over me like ice water. "Maya, what are you making such a fuss about?" he snapped. "I've already explained about Ella. She's threatening to resign just because you liked her post. What do you want? Are you going to take over as president's secretary if she leaves?" My hands trembled. This wasn't the man who once spoke to me with such tenderness, who would apologize profusely for even the slightest raised voice. The words I'd prepared, about the hospital, about our lost child, died in my throat. What was the point? He'd made his priorities crystal clear. "Take good care of your precious secretary, then," I managed to say before ending the call. Turning to the doctor, I forced myself to steady my voice. "I'll sign the papers myself." Minutes later, my phone buzzed again. Maxwell's voice held irritation rather than concern. "Maya, why didn't you tell me you were back? I just made a wasted trip to pick you up." A bitter laugh escaped my lips. Not only had he forgotten about abandoning me in the wilderness 2 nights ago, but he hadn't even noticed my countless missed calls from that terrifying night. "Did you ever think to call and check on me?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Or is your secretary the only person you can think about now?" There was a pause on his end, as if he finally realized how his words sounded. His tone softened, but the damage was done. "Since you're back, take care of yourself. The company's keeping me busy, so I won't be home for a while." "Fine. Do whatever you want." I ended the call, my hand instinctively moving to my abdomen, still tender from the procedure. The physical pain was nothing compared to the ache in my heart. For the next week, as I lay in that sterile hospital room, Maxwell never visited. No calls, no messages, nothing. My decision crystallized in that silence. I had to leave. The universe has a cruel sense of irony. The day I returned home from the hospital, Maxwell chose to appear. He looked at my pale face, putting on a show of concern that once would have seemed genuine. "What have you been doing this week? You look terrible," he said, oblivious to the tragedy that had unfolded. "You need to take better care of yourself, not just for you, but for the baby." His words felt like a final twist of the knife. He didn't know that our child was already gone, that I'd face that loss alone while he was busy making brown sugar water for someone else. "Hey everyone, can you believe what's happening to Maya right now?" But wait, this story takes an even more shocking turn. What Maya discovers next will completely change her life forever, and trust me, it's not what you're expecting at all. You won't believe how Maxwell tries to explain himself when Maya confronts him about that night in the forest. And just when you think things can't get any worse, there's a devastating secret that comes to light at the hospital. Let's just say, after what happens next, there's no going back for either of them. Want to know what makes Maya finally snap? And what about that wedding dress scene? There's a twist coming up that nobody saw coming, not even Maxwell himself. If you're enjoying Maya's story so far, please hit that like button. It really helps support the channel. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss our next dramatic story. And if you know someone who's dealing with relationship troubles, share this video with them. Sometimes the red flags are right in front of us. We just need someone to point them out. Drop a in the comments if you're Team Maya, and let me know what you think Maxwell should have done differently. The second part of this story will leave you speechless. Stay tuned. Maxwell's eyes narrowed as he studied my figure. "Your belly looks smaller. You need to eat more." His words pierced my heart like shards of glass. The loss of our child was still raw, an open wound he knew nothing about. I remembered how different things were when I first told him about the pregnancy. His eyes had lit up with joy and concern. "Maya, you just focus on taking care of the baby," he'd promised then. "I'll handle everything else." Empty words that dissolved the moment Ella entered our lives. "Maxwell, do you know that I started to tell him about the miscarriage, but his phone cut through my confession. I watched his face change as he listened to the caller. "Why are you so careless? I'm coming right now." He rushed toward the door, then paused, as if remembering I was still there. "Ella fell and can't walk. I need to check on her. Don't overthink it." "Go ahead," I replied, my voice eerily calm, my eyes deliberately blank. "I won't overthink it. After all, lives are at stake." The irony of those words tasted bitter in my mouth, thinking of the life we'd just lost. My unusual calmness seemed to unsettle him. He was used to my questions, my concerns about his whereabouts, things that had apparently annoyed him. He lingered for a moment, studying my face before finally leaving. Standing alone in our would-be marital home, I looked around with new eyes. Every piece of furniture, every decoration, though I had bought them all, they reflected his tastes, not mine. Nothing here truly belonged to me, just as I no longer belonged in his heart. The realization crystallized my decision. This wedding couldn't happen. I pulled out my phone and called Lena, my best friend overseas. Her voice burst through the speaker, full of excitement. "Maya, have you finally decided to join my team?" "If you're still willing to take me," I said softly. "Are you kidding? You're a design genius. I've been dying to have you on board. Book me a ticket for 2 weeks from now. But isn't that your wedding day? There won't be a wedding anymore. After the call ended, my mind drifted back to how Maxwell and I first met. I was working as a temporary Sonda coach at the gym where he worked out with his friends. He'd caught my attention immediately, this quiet, brooding man who seemed to carry old heartbreak in his eyes. Being naturally talkative, I'd gradually drawn him out of his shell as he kept coming back. I smiled sadly at the memory of a particularly memorable session when an aggressive client had tried to provoke me during practice. The next evening, Maxwell stumbled home looking exhausted. I was curled up on the sofa, surrounded by design materials, my first steps toward reclaiming my old career. He reached for his usual cup on the coffee table, only to find it empty. The confusion on his face spoke volumes. "Why isn't there any water in the cup?" he asked, as if the world had tilted off its axis. It was such a small thing. The glass of water I'd always made sure was waiting for him, no matter how late he came home. Just like the hangover soup I'd faithfully prepare whenever he'd been drinking. Small gestures that had become part of our routine, part of my love language. "If you want water, pour it yourself," I said flatly, not looking up from my papers. "Your hands work fine." The shift in atmosphere was palpable. Maxwell stiffened, finally sensing something was wrong. "Maya, are you still making a scene about Ella? I told you it's not what you think. She just sprained her ankle yesterday." I thought of Ella's WeChat post from the night before, a photo of her heel with a tiny band-aid, captioned, "Just a little scrape, but look how worried the boss is." The disconnect between his words and reality felt like another small betrayal. "Oh, I see," I replied, deliberately keeping my eyes on my work. "The prenatal checkup is day after tomorrow," he said after a moment. "I'll go with you." I felt a wave of nausea that had nothing to do with pregnancy. The doctor had told me to return for a follow-up in 3 days when I was discharged. "Yes, let's go together," I agreed quietly. "We can discuss everything then, including canceling the wedding." "Okay." The next morning I walked into the dining room to find a plate of shrimp dumplings on the table. Maxwell beamed proudly. "I waited in line for over an hour to get these. Your favorite. I need to take some to Ella after this." My heart sank. "Did you forget? I'm allergic to shrimp." The smile froze on his face, replaced by embarrassment. "Oh, I'll go buy you something else." "Don't bother. I'm heading out anyway. I'll get something myself." "Well, be careful then," he said, already gathering his things. "I have important matters at the company to handle." "I have things to do too," I murmured, watching him rush off, presumably to deliver dumplings to someone who could act. The scene felt like a perfect metaphor for our relationship. Him proudly presenting something that could harm me, then rushing off to share it with someone else. He'd forgotten my allergies, just as he'd forgotten all the other important things about me. The bridal shop's message about my custom wedding dress should have been exciting news. Instead, it felt like a final errand to close this chapter of my life. But when I arrived, the staff's uncomfortable expressions made my stomach clench. "Miss Maya," the consultant said hesitantly, "I'm sorry, but your fiancé, he brought someone else to try on your dress." Then I heard it, Ella's voice floating from the fitting room. "Maxwell, what do you think? Does this dress look better on me or your fiancé?" "You look good in what you're wearing." His familiar voice, warm with admiration, made my blood run cold. Rage rose in my chest like a tide. This wasn't just any dress. It was my design, my creation, something I'd poured my heart into. Walking into the fitting area, I found them together, Maxwell gazing at Ella draped in my dream dress. "What are you doing?" My voice came out steadier than I felt. Maxwell spun around, guilt flashing across his face. "Maya, why are you here?" "Why am I here?" I echoed in disbelief. "This is my dress. The real question is, why is she wearing it?" Ella glided toward me, her face a mask of innocence. "Oh, Maya, please don't be angry." She grabbed my arm, her grip surprisingly tight. "The dress was just so beautiful. I couldn't help asking Maxwell to let me try it on." I caught the gleam of satisfaction in her eyes, just before she suddenly released my arm and threw herself to the floor. "Maya, please," she whimpered. "Don't be angry. I'll take it off right away." Maxwell rushed to her side like a knight to his damsel. "Ella, are you all right?" "I'm fine, Maxwell," she sniffled. "Go comfort Maya. Help her calm down. It wasn't intentional." When Maxwell turned to me, his eyes were dark with anger. "Maya, when did you become so jealous and competitive?" Ella apologized. "Why would you push her?" "Apologize to her. Now." Standing there, watching the man I'd loved for 3 years defend another woman wearing my wedding dress, felt like having my heart carved out. Even now, seeing him so completely turned against me, I couldn't stop loving him, and that made it hurt even more. I took a deep breath, fighting back tears. "If I tell you I didn't push her, would you even believe me?" "Maya, stop being so petty with a little girl." I swallowed hard, refusing to let the tears fall. "I won't admit to something I didn't do, and I won't apologize to her." The beautiful dress I'd designed now felt like a symbol of everything I was losing. Not just a wedding, but the man I thought I knew, the future I'd planned, and the trust I'd given so completely. "Since she loves it so much, she can have it," I said, walking out of the bridal shop without looking back. The wedding dress I'd poured my heart into designing now felt as meaningless as our engagement. Back home, I began sorting through my belongings. 3 years of life together, and everything I truly owned fit into just 2 boxes. The afternoon sun was streaming through the windows when I heard the front door open. Thinking it was Maxwell, I stepped out of my room only to find Ella standing in our living room. My body tensed. "What are you doing here?" She sauntered toward me, victory written across her face. "Oh, Maxwell gave me the keys, of course." She deliberately jingled them in the air, and that's when I saw it. The heart-shaped bracelet on her wrist. My breath caught. It was a limited edition piece I'd been admiring, symbolizing eternal unity. There was only one in the market, and somehow it had found its way to her wrist. The last warm ember in my heart turned to ash. "Take whatever you need and leave," I said, my voice like ice. "Maya, you saw it today." Her smile was pure venom. "Maxwell loves me now. You're just the obsolete fiancé. Be smart and disappear quietly, or I'll have to make you leave. Wouldn't that be embarrassing?" I laughed bitterly. "You want to climb the social ladder? Fine. But let Maxwell come tell me himself. Until then, you're nothing but the other woman." "You, just wait!" She stormed out, her heels clicking against the floor like angry punctuation marks. Minutes later, my phone rang. Maxwell's voice was tight with anger. "Maya, I sent Ella to get some important documents, and she came back crying. Why did you attack her?" Of course she'd run straight to him. "I didn't attack her. She disrespected me in my own home. I simply responded. Look, I know you're still upset about the wedding dress, but she apologized. Let it go." I opened it, saw the identical heart-shaped bracelet I'd spotted on Ella's wrist hours earlier, and dropped both box and bracelet into the trash. "I don't wear other people's hand-me-downs." His smile vanished. "Maya, when did you become so unreasonable? You're the one who said you liked it." Something inside me snapped. "Maxwell," I said, my voice steady despite the storm in my heart. "Let's break up and cancel the wedding." "No, Maya. What are you saying? The wedding is in a week. You can't just cancel it like this." Maxwell's voice rose with disbelief. "Are these all my problems?" I asked quietly. "Think about it. When was the last time you truly cared about me? When I needed you, you were always with your secretary. You even gave her keys to our home without telling me. If you stopped loving me, you could have said so. I would have understood. Instead, you let her confidence grow until she felt bold enough to come here and taunt me in my own home." I watched understanding slowly dawn on Maxwell's face, as if he was finally seeing how far he'd strayed. "Maya," he said nervously, "Ella can be immature sometimes. Don't take her words seriously. I won't take anything to heart anymore, but breaking up isn't a joke." The disbelief in his eyes was almost comical. Everyone knew how deeply I loved Maxwell, enough to abandon my career as a kickboxing coach to become a housewife. People would believe Maxwell might leave me, but me leaving him? Unthinkable. Yet they didn't understand how disappointment could pile up until even the most precious things became unbearable. "I know you're still angry," he said softly. "Let's visit your parents after your checkup tomorrow. You've always wanted me to come with you, right?" I almost laughed. 3 years together, about to be married, and he'd never met my parents. Every promised visit had ended in cancellation. "We'll talk tomorrow. I'm tired and need to rest." "Let me help you to your room," he offered. "It's normal for pregnant women to feel sleepy." The words "pregnant women" no longer stung as they once had. I wondered how he'd react tomorrow when he learned the truth about our lost child. The next morning at the hospital, confusion crossed Maxwell's face as we entered the gynecology department. "Maya, aren't we here for a prenatal checkup? Why are we in this section?" "The baby is gone," I said flatly. "I'm here for a follow-up appointment." Maxwell stumbled backward, face draining of color. "What do you mean, gone? You're 4 months pregnant." The doctor, the same one who treated me during my hospitalization, couldn't contain herself any longer. "Sir," she snapped, "what kind of husband are you? Your wife was admitted here after being caught in the rain, running a dangerous fever. We had to terminate the pregnancy to save her life, and you were nowhere to be found." Her words hung in the air like a death knell for our relationship. Maxwell's face crumpled as the doctor's words sank in, the realization that our child was lost the night he abandoned me in the wilderness. "Maya, let me explain," he pleaded. "I really had something urgent that night. Why didn't you call me when it happened?" Fear crawled up my spine as I remembered that terrifying night. If not for my athletic background, there would have been 2 deaths, mine and our unborn child's. "Who says I didn't call?" "Your secretary answered, said you were showering and couldn't come to the phone." Maxwell's brow furrowed as he tried to piece together that night. "I was soaked when I got to the office and took a shower. Why didn't you call again?" I almost laughed at his lie. I'd seen his WeChat post. He'd been making brown sugar water for Ella, not working at the office. He'd learned to lie so easily for her. "I did call. More than 10 times. Never got through." Sudden understanding flickered across his face. He'd found my number in his blocked list the next day, something that had puzzled him then. Now panic crept into his voice as he grabbed my hand. "Maya, I'm so sorry. I must have hit the wrong button. Blocked your number by accident. Please believe me." I stared at him coldly, watching him make excuses for Ella. "It doesn't matter anymore." The doctor shot Maxwell a disgusted look. "Miss Maya must have had terrible karma from 8 past lives to end up with a husband like you." "He won't be my husband for long," I replied, following the doctor into the exam room. After the checkup, as I walked toward the hospital entrance, my phone rang. It was Lena. "Maya, I've finished all your onboarding paperwork. Anything else you need me to prepare in advance? We'll discuss it when I arrive." I hung up to find Maxwell watching me anxiously. "Who was that? Where are you going?" His eyes searched my face. "No one. You misheard." I kept my expression neutral, not wanting to reveal my plans to leave. Maxwell could be controlling. He might try to stop me. Doubt clouded his features as he studied me, looking for any sign of deception. "Really?" "Really," I replied, my face a careful mask. Finding nothing to confirm his suspicions, he relaxed slightly. "Go home and wait for me. I need to handle some things at the company, then I'll pick you up to visit your parents. It's a 600-kilometer trip, 2 days round trip." I nodded. It was perfectly normal for him to want to wrap up work before such a long journey. What he didn't know was that I had a very different journey planned. I went home and watched the sun paint the sky in shades of orange and purple, but Maxwell never showed up. The truth hit me like a cold wave. I meant nothing to him anymore. You know how disappointment works? Drop by drop, it fills you up until one day, it turns into something darker, heavier. That's what happened with Maxwell. I had reached my breaking point. I grabbed the suitcase I'd packed weeks ago, my secret admission of what I'd known deep down all along. The closet told our story better than words could. Day after day, I'd removed my clothes, leaving empty hangers like goodbye notes, and Maxwell never even noticed. He walked past that half-empty closet every morning, blind to the signs of my leaving. Some things speak louder in their silence. When I showed up at my parents' doorstep that night, the sight of their graying hair hit me hard. 2 years. I'd been away for 2 whole years. Mom and Dad had worked their fingers to the bone to send me to design school, their dream for me as bright as my own. But I'd traded that dream for Maxwell's world, and now here I was, coming home alone. Maya? Mom's voice trembled with worry. Where's Maxwell? Wasn't he supposed to come with you? The empty space beside me answered before I could. I broke down and told them everything. Mom wrapped me in her arms, just like when I was little. My brave girl, she whispered. You deserve so much better. We're here for you. That's when my phone rang. Maxwell. Dad's face hardened. Let me handle this. Maxwell's voice came through, smooth as always. Maya, please. There was an emergency at work. I'm on my way home now. We'll go back together tomorrow, just like I promised. I almost laughed. The emergency was right there on social media. Ella's post showing Maxwell laughing with her family, captioned, "Thank you, boss, for making time to meet my parents." The truth, served with a smile. Our family doesn't need a son-in-law like you. Dad's words cut through the air like steel. Uncle, I don't understand. It's simple. Maya's done with you. We all are. No, please, I love Maya. I grabbed the phone. Your kind of love is too expensive, Maxwell. The price is my self-respect. I hung up and blocked his number. Later, I heard he kept calling, finally understanding this wasn't just another fight he could smooth over with words. Some bridges, once burned, leave only ashes behind. Maxwell's world crumbled in real time. His trembling fingers fumbled with the navigation app, searching desperately for my parents' address before realizing he'd never bothered to save it. Frustration boiled over as he slammed his fist against the steering wheel. Doubt and denial drove him to race home, running red lights in his desperate need to prove me wrong. The truth waited for him in our bedroom. When he yanked open the wardrobe doors, the empty hangers swayed silently, like witnesses to my departure. Panic sent him stumbling to the bathroom, where the vanity stood stripped of my belongings. He became a man possessed, searching every corner of our home for any trace of me. In the trash, he found his final answer, the discarded gift box. Our shared space had become a museum of absence, every empty shelf and drawer telling the story of my gradual disappearance. Reality hit him like a physical blow, bringing him to his knees. The man who always stood tall and confident now sat crumpled on the floor, his eyes vacant, as if the very life had been drained from him. He looked like a stranger to himself. The next morning, I began the painful process of undoing our future. One by one, I messaged our friends about the canceled wedding. Their responses came flooding back, filled with disbelief. "Have you lost your mind?" they asked. "You've always loved Maxwell." I wished I had lost my mind. Maybe then this wouldn't hurt so much. When Maxwell's mother called, I wasn't surprised. She'd always been kind to me, and I owed her at least this final conversation. Her voice carried its usual warmth, but her words were all about damage control. "Maya, whatever happened between you?" But she wasn't my mother. She couldn't understand the depths of pain I'd endured. Her priority was protecting the Shui family name, not my broken heart. "Aunt," I said quietly, "I can't return to Maxwell. Please forget you ever knew me. The daughter-in-law you wanted, Maxwell's already found her. She's just not me." Her next words froze me in place. "But you're carrying Maxwell's child. At least wait until after the birth to make any decisions." The bitter truth caught in my throat. Maxwell hadn't told her about the miscarriage. Of course not. How could he admit that his actions had led to the loss of our baby? "The child is gone," I said, my voice sharp with pain. "Your son is responsible for that too. Please, let's end all contact here." I hung up before she could respond, her protests cut short by the beep of the disconnected call. Afterward, I sat with my mother in our small courtyard, letting the warm sunlight wash over me. The gentle rhythm of everyday life felt like a healing balm, until the sound of our front door opening shattered the peace. Maxwell appeared in our courtyard like an uninvited ghost from my past. His eyes found mine, desperate and pleading, as he crouched beside me. "Maya, enough of this game. Come home with me. I've already ordered them to make the wedding even grander. I want everyone to know that you, Maya, are Maxwell's only wife for life." His words hit me like a slap. He still thought this was some childish game, a temporary tantrum he could smooth over with grand gestures. I yanked my arm free from his grip, my voice steady despite the storm inside. "Maxwell, this isn't a joke. I'm completely clear-headed. It's over. Let's at least end this with some dignity." "How can you just decide to break up? What did I do wrong?" His voice cracked with genuine confusion. A bitter laugh escaped me as memories flooded back. I remembered that sunny afternoon, my head in his lap, asking playfully, "Maxwell, what would you do if I ever broke up with you?" He'd tapped my nose gently, so sure of himself. "I'll never give you the chance to say goodbye." "But what if that day comes?" I'd pressed. "It never will. I swear." Now his past promises felt like shards of glass in my throat. Empty words that had cut me deeper than any knife could. "Fine. Since you're so confused, let me show you why." I pulled out my phone, scrolling through Ella's social media posts. With each swipe, the color drained from his face. I didn't know she posted these things," he stammered. "She's just my mentor's daughter. He asked me to look after her. There's nothing between us, Maya. You have to believe me. She's just being playful. She never meant to come between us. I'm sorry I handled it badly. I never meant to hurt you." "Really?" I felt a cold smile spread across my face. "Then let's see what you..." Later I learned that Maxwell had summoned Ella to his office that same day. He'd fired her after a harsh confrontation, but by then, I was already landing in my new city. Lena met me at the airport, wrapping me in a fierce hug that felt like coming home. "I've missed you so much," she beamed. "Finally, I have my partner in crime back." Tears pricked my eyes as I hugged her back. "Thank you for taking me in, Lena." She playfully flicked my forehead. "Don't be silly. Love isn't everything, you know. You'll always have my friendship." She was right. Love might be priceless, but friendship, true, steady friendship, was worth even more. As I settled into my new job at the company Lena had helped me find, I threw myself into the work. People say staying busy helps heal a broken heart. Maybe they're right, but I think it's more than that. It's not about forgetting. It's about remembering who you are without the person who once defined you. I was starting a new chapter, one without the name Shui in it. And for the first time in a long time, I felt ready to write my own story. Time has a way of pushing people to the edges of our memories. Through Lena, I heard about the chaos unfolding in my wake. Ella, bitter about Maxwell's rejection, had turned vindictive. She took to social media to slander him, then dealt an even harder blow by selling company secrets to competitors. Maxwell's business bled from these betrayals until he finally snapped and had her arrested. When Lena told me, I felt nothing. Their drama had become another story in someone else's book. 3 months into my new life abroad, Maxwell appeared at my door. Before I could process it, he had wrapped me in a desperate embrace, his tears soaking my shoulder. "Maya, I love you. I've always loved you," he sobbed. "I understand my mistakes now. Ella's been punished for what she did. Please, come home with me." I stepped out of his arms, the space between us feeling like an ocean. "Maxwell," my voice was steady, certain. "It's too late. Let's stop hurting each other. I've built a good life here, without you." He stood there, frozen, as if my words had turned him to stone. The rejection hit him like a physical blow, his eyes flooding with desperation and disbelief. "Maya, I'll die without you," he shouted, a last desperate plea. "Since we lost our child, your life or death stopped being my concern." The words left me like ice, sharp and cold. I watched tears fill his eyes before he let out a bitter laugh. "Fine, we're done." He stumbled away, muttering words I chose not to hear. Later, I learned he'd gotten into a terrible car accident that night, losing a leg. But I felt no obligation to return, no pull to rush to his side. That chapter of my life was firmly closed. Instead, I threw myself into my true passion, design. The creativity I'd once suppressed for Maxwell's sake now flowed freely. Awards and recognition followed, but the real victory was simpler. I'd found myself again, not as Maxwell's almost wife or the girl who lost everything, but as Maya, designer, survivor, woman standing proudly at the peak of her own life. Some might call this ending sad. I call it freedom. Because sometimes the happiest endings aren't about finding new love. They're about finding yourself.